It's for art. And here I am again. I'm going to read another chapter of Karl Grossman's book. And goodness gracious, it's hot. I don't know what it's like where you guys are, but I couldn't even get out the blow dryer to blow dry my hair today. I was like, I am not doing that. I'm not adding any extra heat to my life at all. So my hair's all fluffy. So anyways, I don't think you guys care at all, which is the good part, which is why I like my YouTube community. There's something to be said with having very few followers. I don't get that many hate things. I have all the haters blocked. Anyways, I want to get down to this, and it's probably worth your while when you're hearing this. It would be interesting for you to see KEPW. I think these are going to start airing next week. And I'm going to make another little video right after this, but I am going to start my radio show this weekend for sure. And I haven't figured this out. Maybe you guys could give me some comments on this one in my comment section. What would be a perfect time for you? I'm kind of thinking just sticking with my time of 8 o'clock in the morning, Monday and Thursday. And just doing Monday and Thursday, 2 days a week. And then I want to do a third show on politics. And I think I want to do that like 3 in the afternoon or something. I have to figure out, we need to figure out regular days so people can find it, right? Because it's going to be out on the weird worldwide internet thing. But I think 8 o'clock is a good time. So anyways, why don't you guys give me your opinions, and then we'll take you to the peanut gallery. How about that? You have tissue set like this? Okay. I could have blown my nose before I started, huh? Okay. Thus, here we are. This is Karl Grossman's book, and we are on page 43. And the last sentence was the last paragraph. I'll read you the whole last paragraph. How about that? I think maybe I'll just do that every time. So we're starting the book by Karl Grossman, Weapons in Space, in case you forgot the title. And it was written in 2002. It's a shock. 2001. So some of these things have come to pass, and some of them have been stopped. Thank God. So anyways, the Outer Space Treaty has a provision that addresses damage caused by space devices. The treaty declares that a nation that launches an object into outer space is internationally liable for damage caused by it. The follow-up 1972 UN Treaty, Convention on International Liability for Damage Caused by Space Objects, says a launching state shall be absolutely liable for such damage. But in 1991, the NASA and the U.S. Department of Energy, entered into a space nuclear power agreement to cover U.S. nuclear space flights with the Price-Anderson Act. Oh, remember that? I remember that. For those of you who didn't hear it, the Price-Anderson Act indemnifies anybody from going to jail, knowingly or unknowingly causing harm, as well as caps their liability. This is a U.S. law which limits liability in the event of a nuclear accident to $8.9 million for U.S. domestic damage and $100 million for damage for all foreign nations. That's outrageous. Hey, hold on. I'm going to put you on hold for just a little tiny second because I am going to blow my nose. Hold on. Sorry about that. I just decided if I was going to read a long way, I sure better fix what I got going on there. Okay. Back to the paragraph about the damage. So how much damage do you think? 8.9 billion for U.S. domestic damage, but only 100 million for damage to all foreign nations? Like, they could drop plutonium over all of Europe, the 42 pounds that was on the Cassini, or even let's say 5 pounds over Europe, and the only thing that the United States would pay is $100 million. Even if you put that in today's terms and it turns into like 2 billion, that's not enough money. Back to the book. Thus, if an inadvertent re-entry of Cassini, see, Karl Grossman was thinking just like me. Thus, if an inadvertent re-entry of the Cassini back into the Earth's atmosphere had occurred in 1999, and a part of Europe or Asia suffered nuclear contamination, all the nations and all the people affected could only have collected in damage, despite the land polluted, the number of people who would develop cancer and other diseases. I'll add that, not just cancer, Karl, who would develop cancer, but everything else. $100 million. That's it. The same will be true for an accident involving the plutonium-fueled Europa and other planned U.S. space nuclear shots ahead. Meanwhile, in the event of an exchange involving nuclear-powered weapons in space, how would the resulting radioactive pollution affect life on Earth? Furthermore, warfare in space will produce large amounts of space debris that could prevent humanity from journeying into space and limit us to the Earth. The space above Earth is already littered with debris ranging from bolts and metal bits to defunct satellites and booster rockets. There are now 110,000 man-made objects orbiting the Earth above the Earth. I'll bet you that number has quadrupled, because this was 2001. Some 8,870 larger than a softball, according to one recent survey. It has gotten so bad that NASA now replaces pitted orbiter windows after most flights. Oh gosh, after most flights of the shuttle, noted in a 1997 report of the National Research Council, which warned that far more serious accidents involving space debris could occur, resulting in the loss of life or the vehicle. It said, the speed at which objects in low Earth orbit can collide makes these objects dangerous. The typical impact velocities of more than 20,000 miles per hour could mean even a millimeter-sized object can cause considerable damage. A millimeter, that's like eensy. The U.S. Space Command monitors debris, and when the space shuttle is flown, advises NASA. The U.S. Department of Defense Space Surveillance Network, CSNN, warns the space shuttle program of possible close conjunctions with cataloged orbiting objects. But probably more than 95% of the objects that could cause critical damage to the orbit are not cataloged because they are too small to be reliably detected by SNN detectors, said the report, protecting the space shuttle from meteoroids and orbital debris. Protecting the space shuttle from meteoroids or orbital debris. I'm sorry about that. That's a tongue twister for me. All right. The amount of space junk has doubled since 1990 and now poses a navigational hazard in space. Oh, wait a minute. I skipped the sentence. This report, protecting the space shuttle from meteoroids and orbital debris. It was done under a U.S. government contract involving the National Academy of Sciences and NASA. The amount of space junk has doubled since 1990 and now poses a navigational hazard in space, says the Norwegian space expert Erik Tanberg. Great. The U.S. and Norway are planning a giant radar station to be called Globus 2 in Norway's Arctic, specifically to better monitor orbiting debris. An exchange involving space weaponry, a shooting war in space, would far surpass the amounts of junk in orbit now above the Earth. The heavens would be thoroughly littered, no doubt. Excalibur. My fellow Americans, tonight we are launching an effort which holds the promise of changing the course of human history, said President Reagan in a nationally televised address on March 23, 1983, announcing the Strategic Defense Initiative, later known as Star Wars. Several excellent books document Reagan's Star Wars plan, including the most recent Francis Fitzgerald's Way Out There in the Blue, Reagan, Star Wars, and the Cold War. I remember that. And earlier works including War in Space by Nigel Flynn and 2 books by New York Times reporter William J. Broad. They tell how, with the election of Reagan in 1980, Dr. Edward Teller, the murderer, Dr. Edward Teller, the principal, that was my comment, Karl Grossman did not say that. This is what Karl Grossman wrote. I just have to make that perfectly clear. Dr. Edward Teller, the principal figure in the formation and operation of Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, and the main figure, too, in developing the hydrogen bomb, saw a grand opportunity to push his plan for space warfare. The initial Teller program was to be centered around orbiting hydrogen bombs that would energize X-ray lasers. The concept was codenamed Excalibur. Flynn traces Reagan's exposure to Excalibur with a visit in 1967 to Teller's laboratory east of San Francisco when he was governor of California. Hold on, I want to put this keyboard right here so I don't have to be not hitting it. Oh, gee whiz. Okay. First sentence. Upon Reagan's election as president, Teller and this word, I get tied up on words. An arch conservative, in my view, somebody who murders people is not conservative. That's radical. So anyways, upon Reagan's election as president, Teller, an arch conservative, worked with others in the U.S. right wing. Again, right wing, I oppose that because they are nothing right. They are all wrong. In the U.S. right wing to push a program of space weaponization. Also involved was High Frontier, an organization set up, says Flynn, by the Heritage Foundation, a right-wing group in Washington. Teller was the sole scientist with High Frontier, according to Broad's Teller's Wars, the top secret story behind the Star Wars deception. The idea of space-based strategic policy began to take shape in the president's mind, assisted in 1981 by the formation of High Frontier, says Flynn in War in Space. Teller insisted on Excalibur being a key element of the Star Wars scheme. Sorry about that. He calls it a scheme. Let me repeat that. Teller insisted on Excalibur being a key element in the Star Wars scheme. As Broad explains the Excalibur concept in Star Warriors, quote, around the H-bomb at its core are long, thin metal rods which, when struck by radiation, emit powerful bursts of X-rays. As the bomb at the core of an X-ray battle station exploded, multiple beams would flash out to strike multiple targets before the entire station consumed itself in a ball of nuclear fire, unquote. Circling the Earth. These guys were insane. Oh my gosh. Former Army Lieutenant General Daniel O. Graham, ex-head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, advisor to Reagan and deputy director of High Frontier, however, balked at using hydrogen bomb-powered X-ray lasers as the base of Star Wars because, quote, while other weapons could protect themselves, an X-ray laser waiting in orbit for an enemy attack would have to destroy itself in order to fire a beam at the attacker, unquote. And also because the U.S. public would never accept the placement of a nuclear weapon in space, according to Broad. No kidding. Oh my gosh. Are these people just insane? Yes, I think we have seen that answer. They are perfectly insane. Ice water, that's the fix to the heat. Oh, wow. That is awesome. This is what I did. I'll show you guys. This is like what how many pints? I guess this is like 4 or 5 pints, a big jar, 5 pints of water. I filled it with ice water, and I took my screen that I used to make seeds. You know, you buy these screens so you can make sprouts. You put your sprout seeds upside down, and then you grow sprouts. But I just used it as a screen for water, so I could just pour the water out and not mess with the ice and get ice all over my freaking desk. So it was pretty good, eh? Anyways, back to the story of weapons in space. Okay, here we go again, these lunatics. Meanwhile, an array of other space-based weapons was being advanced, notably a variety of laser weapons as well as hypervelocity guns and particle beams. Most would have one thing in common. They'd require nuclear power, not actual hydrogen bombs like in the Teller Excalibur scheme, but nuclear power systems. Super plutonium-filled isotope thermoelectric generators and actual space reactors. There would also be additional layers, including theater defense and missile defense. Also part of the plan was a nuclear-propelled rocket using a particle bed reactor. A design originated at Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island, New York. Codenamed Timberwind, the nuclear-powered rocket would have a heavy Star Wars weaponry and other equipment into space. Excuse me, let me repeat that sentence. Wow. It's a long sentence, but it is worth repeating. Also part of the plan was a nuclear-propelled rocket using a particle bed reactor. A design originated at Brookhaven National Laboratory on Long Island, New York. Codenamed Timberwind, the nuclear-powered rocket would loft heavy Star Wars weaponry and other equipment into space. Later, it was given a second mission, serving as a rocket for flights to Mars. The Pentagon would claim initially that the emphasis is being given to non-nuclear weapons in Star Wars, noted Flynn in War in Space. But in fact, massive amounts of money was being spent on nuclear-driven systems for weapons. And by 1988, General James Abramson, the director of Strategic Defense Initiative Organization, General James Abramson, the director of the Strategic Defense Initiative Organization, was insisting that nuclear power was critical for Star Wars. He told the symposium on space nuclear power and propulsion in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1988, an annual event, that, quote, without reactors in orbit, there's going to be a long, long light cord that goes down to the surface of the Earth, unquote. Failure to develop nuclear power in space, says Abramson, would cripple efforts to deploy anti-missile sensors and weapons in orbit. And that was in 1988 when they knew about solar. So they knew what they were doing. Earlier, he began to let the nuclear space cat out of the bag. Exactly. By conceding at a congressional hearing that, quote, research on nuclear system technologies for both base load and potential weapons power, unquote, for Star Wars weaponry is being conducted in conjunction with the Department of Energy. Abramson spoke of a synergistic relationship on Star Wars between the Pentagon and NASA. He noted that NASA, the Pentagon, and the DOE were co-funding General Electric's SP-100 space reactor. How long have I been on here? I have got no idea. That's the weird part. Well, I'm not read out yet, so I'm just going to keep going. Politics, puppeteering, and the power structure. Well, let me see. I can go backwards and see where I started. That'll tell me how long. So I've read 1, 2, 3 pages. I'll see how much farther I'll go. Yeah, I'll go 3 more pages. I think that'll be a good long time. But anyways, politics, puppeteering, and the power structure. By 2000, the Star Wars plan with some changes. By 2000, the Star Wars plans with some changes. Teller's hydrogen bomb Excalibur scheme was ultimately dropped as being wholly impractical, and it was still alive. Okay, so let's reread what his intent was by this. By 2000, the Star Wars plan with some changes, and then there's a dash. It says, Tiller's hydrogen bomb Excalibur plan was ultimately dropped as being wholly impractical, dash, was still alive. The heart of Ronald Reagan's 1983 Star Wars program lives on, kept beating by a mix of election year politicking, behind-the-scenes defense industry puppeteering, and a fiercely committed group of conservative think tanks and anti-missile system advocates. Time magazine reported in a July 2000 article on missile defense. Wow. I cannot but inject here, if you guys have not heard that as I've been doing this reading. I object. I think we need to take our language back. It is not conservative. These people are not conservative, and they're not right-wing. They're insane wing, maybe, broken wing, broken heart wing, greedy wing. I don't know what is wrong with them, but they are not conservative. It is very expensive to be a conservative. That's not conservative. It costs society a lot of money to have poor people and to have broken people and to have a society that doesn't thrive. When you mount all the money at the top of the heap, the conservatives, oh, they're conserving it. They're keeping it the way it was. I heard all that argument. Why do you think they talk us into that so that we don't change our way of thinking about it? I'm not buying that argument. That's what I said in class when I was going to the U of O. I forget, one of my political science classes, I objected to that. We need to take the language back. They are wrong thinking. They are expensive thinking. They're not conservatives. And think tanks, they're not think tanks. They're propaganda tanks. That's what they are. They are not think tanks. They call themselves think tanks to make themselves, oh, we're so smart. No, they're greed tanks. What they do is they put a bunch of brains together to say, how much money can we get out of people? How few people can we murder and kill? Or how many people? I mean, there are some of these guys that they don't mind. They think the population of Flint should all die. They don't care. They're racist. I mean, it's, ooh-wee, don't get me going here. Let me get back to the book. Okay. Where did I stop? Those working to make sure Star Wars kept beating included the Republican right, aerospace corporations that might have spent huge amounts on money and lobbying the political system, arch conservative foundations like the Heritage Foundation and the U.S. military, especially its U.S. Space Command. Are you telling me that they lobbied our own government? The U.S. military lobbies our own government? What? Not surprisingly, noted Time, in the Reagan-era Star Wars program lives on, and It says, quote, defense contractors have a major interest in national missile defense systems, especially since its ultimate cost is estimated at more than $30 billion. The four largest weapon contractors, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and TRW, together received more than $2.2 billion in missile defense research and development money over the recent 21-month span, according to a report on the World Policy Institute. In 1997 and 98, the latest years for which figures are available, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, TRW spent $35 million on lobbying. Now, this book was written in 2001, remember. On the Republican right, no politician has been more active in recent times keeping Star Wars alive than Senator Bob Smith of New Hampshire. Thank God he's gone. Control of space is more than a new mission area, but it is our moral legacy. Control in space is more than a new mission area. It is our moral legacy, our next manifest destiny, our chance to create security for centuries to come. Smith told the Aerospace Industry Association in 2000. I wonder if he's still there. He must be gone. I've never heard of him. Bob Smith. With the technology that we have already developed and demonstrated, we have the opportunity today to move forward. He stressed on the program that President Reagan envisioned almost 20 years ago, more than the marginal defense this administration has been struggling with for the past few months. Space is absolutely critical to figure war fighting. What does that sentence say? Space is absolutely critical to figure war fighting. This increasing importance was demonstrated in the Gulf War and the Balkans. I firmly believe that whoever controls space will win the next war. Why does there have to be a next war? He advocated a broad program of including weapons in space and attainment by the U.S. of global dominance. Well, now we know why it all happened, because these guys were lunatics. How immoral. How completely immoral. You know what's weird to realize is that we've already had the military coup. The military already runs our government. And they let us speak out. We're just like little tea cows. They don't give a squat what we say. Just don't gather and just don't organize and protest and vote, And so, by the way, check your voter registration because they're definitely scrubbing people. And keep checking. Okay, global dominance. Smith, a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee, has been a leader in the Congress of creating a separate U.S. Space Force from the U.S. Air Force. A Space Force would put the same muscle behind space missions that the Army, Navy, and Air Force flex in their missions, he said. He authored an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act for year 2000 that established a 13-member commission chaired by Donald Rumsfeld. Wow. To look into how a U.S. Space Force would operate. Oh my God, that makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck. Donald Rumsfeld was involved in this? Oh, this guy Smith must be some evil, evil guy. Wow, I got to look into this. There's a couple things I'm going to do when I stop this reading. But so-called centrist political elements in the U.S., including many elected Democrats, have been more than just going along. I think I skipped ahead. Oh, no, I didn't. But so-called centrist political elements in the U.S., including many elected Democrats, have been more than just going along. The massive amounts of money dispensed by the aerospace corporations has been one factor. But there is more. Through the years, a good number of Democratic officials have backed a program of space warfare, even during the late 80s when many Americans were refusing to accept Reagan's Star Wars scheme, and through the Clinton administration of the 1990s. Exactly. The Democratic Party has shown over and over again that it is in consonance with these plans for space warfare and global domination, says Bruce Gagnon of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. So to make this clear, I don't know Bruce Gagnon. The other night I said, oh, I know of him. I meant I know of him now. I had never even heard of him before Fukushima happened, before I began to realize, like, wait a minute, we're being poisoned and nobody's telling us. It's up to us to figure it out. And that's why we need to read these books. Like, this stuff is kind of shocking. I don't know about you, but I'm like, doing. Okay, let's get back to this. The Democratic Party has shown over and over again that it is in consonance with these plans for space warfare and global domination, says Bruce Gagnon of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. In Congress, they've supported in strong numbers the expenditures. Moreover, with NASA and U.S. corporate interests seeking to mine the moon, Mars, and other planets, along with the asteroids, you will see a conjunction of interests. Wow. It is not just right-wing kooks in the military promoting the Star Wars, declares Gagnon. It is what we can call the power structure. Amen to that, brother. Strong evidence of that can be found in the book Military Space Forces, The Next 50 Years, that stresses in its title page that it was commissioned by Congress, a Democratic-controlled U.S. Congress of the mid-1980s. Wow. Military Space Forces, The Next 50 Years, that stresses its title as it was commissioned by Congress. That's amazing. That's what they titled it. This blueprint for space warfare is as wild and extreme as anything produced in the U.S. Space Command or the Heritage Foundation, and yet it was endorsed personally by a group of mostly Democrats and commissioned by a Democratic Congress. The list of officials signing off on the congressional introduction is topped by the facsimile signatures of Representatives Ike Skelton of Missouri and John Spratt of South Carolina, Democrats and leaders in recent years for missile defense. Then there's the signatures of Senator John Glenn of Ohio, an ex-astronaut and a Democrat, given a NASA space shuttle ride in 1999. Now a U.S. Senator, then Representative Bill Nelson, a Florida Democrat. He's actually now a senator. So Bill Nelson's now actually a senator. Then now U.S. Senator, then Representative Bill Nelson, a Florida Democrat representing Cape Canaveral, and the rest of the Space Coast, who got his NASA space shuttle ride in 1986. So he got a space shuttle ride. And Representative Harold Volkmer, I never heard of him. Representative Harold Volkmer, a Missouri Democrat. The two Republicans are Representative John Kasich of Ohio and Ben Blas, the non-voting member of the House from Guam. So we know about John Kasich. He's been around a long time. The congressional introduction declares that Congress asked John M. Collins, Senior Specialist in National Defense for the Congressional Research Service of the Library of Congress, in June of 1987 to prepare a frame of reference that would help Congress evaluate future as well as present military policies to programs and budgets. After a foreword by General John L. Potrowski, Poitrowski, Potrowski, then Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Space Command, Military Space Forces, opens with a consideration of economic and military enterprises on the moon. The moon is rich in many natural resources. Iron, titanium, aluminum, magnesium, manganese, and calcium are abundant. Simple machines could easily strip top layers. God, these people, they never stop. They just remind me of the ants in the jungle that eat everything on their way. Lord. Military bases on the moon would not only defend the mining operations, but could take advantage of what military space forces call the gravity well of Earth. This is described as a channel in which space between the moon. This is described as a channel in space between the moon and the Earth. Military space forces at the bottom of Earth's so-called gravity well are poorly positioned to accomplish offensive, defensive, and deterrent missions because great energy is needed to overcome gravity during launch, it says. But forces at the top on the moon could act more rapidly. Put simply, it takes less energy to drop objects down a well than to cast them out. Forces at the top also enjoy more maneuvering room and greater reaction time, unquote. A map of the best site on the moon from which the U.S. could take military advantage of this gravity well is provided, and the work stresses that U.S. armed forces might lie in wait at that location to hijack rival shipments. What? I'm going to read that again. I know I'm messing it up, but I'm going to read it again. A map of the best site on the moon from which the U.S. could take military advantage of this gravity well is provided. And the work stresses that U.S. armed forces might lie in wait at the location to hijack rival shipments of materials mined by other nations. The U.S., according to this congressionally authored plan, would engage in piracy in space. My goodness gracious. Uh-oh, I think I messed something up here. Uh-oh. It's white, so I don't know. Maybe you guys are seeing me, but I don't see it. Am I there? There I am. So you've been seeing me, okay. I'm going to have to put this thing up here because I've got to move my keyboard, folks. Because that's what happened. I banged it and then I lost the screen. So I don't know how long I've been reading, but I've only got like a little... I think I'll stop here. I think that's enough. So let's leave ourselves with that thing. The U.S., according to this congressionally authored plan, would engage in piracy in space. Well, at least they're admitting they're complete bastards before we even get up there. And we wonder why we have the chaos that we have. Well, I'm going to do a reading again tomorrow night, you guys. I am going to piece up, I think this is number 5, so I'm going to do tomorrow 3, piece them all up. I'll do another one tomorrow. And put your courage feet on. We definitely need it. I'll talk to you guys later. Ciao. By the way, I want to thank KEPW for carrying this. www.kepw.org, and I would suggest you guys go listen to them, man. They have some really awesome local Oregonian music that is, and they have great songs and activists, a bunch of peace activists, and they have good old music, good funk. So anyways,